All right, our theme for this series is from Proverbs chapter 31, verse 30. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. So in this series, we're studying godly women of the Bible and how they exemplify the Beatitudes taught by Jesus in Matthew chapter 5. And today we're looking at Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, which reads, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And we'll see that Hannah learned to be poor in spirit when she decided to give up her will for God's will. I spent some time looking at this idea of poor in spirit because it's a concept that I've kind of struggled with a bit. The Greek word that's used for poor means destitute, that is having absolutely nothing. It's not just needy, because that's a different word for poor that Jesus uses other times, but it means having nothing. And then the Greek word for spirit means breath or wind, and it's used to refer to the Holy Spirit and our own spirits, that will that God gives us. It's not just life, because animals have life, but it's that will that God gives us that is different. So in the context of Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is referring to a person's soul or their inner self, that spirit from God that gives us free will. And I spent way too much time on this, of course. And one of these days we'll study the Beatitudes, and I'll be ready. I'll have this one halfway done already. But for today, we're going to go with the definition for poor in spirit as illustrated by Jesus. Turn over with me to John chapter 6. In John 6, verse 38. Jesus says, "For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." Turn over a couple of pages to John chapter 14 and verse 31. Which reads, "But so that the world may know that I love the Father, I do exactly as the Father commanded me." Back just a bit to Luke chapter 22 and verse 42. Jesus knew he was about to die, and he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." And we know from Matthew chapter 26 that he said this 3 different times. Morning, Catherine. Morning, Peggy. So to be poor in spirit, as illustrated by Jesus, is to remove our will. Remember, that word poor means to have nothing of my will, and accept God's will. Any thoughts or comments before we jump into Hannah here? Okay, so what we're going to see today is that Hannah learned, and this is not something that comes automatically. This is something that's really hard, because I've got a lot of will.
I think we all do.
Let's see. There we go. Sorry about that. So, to give up our will, and not just a little bit, not to just, he didn't use the word poor, that means you have a little bit. He used the word for poor, that means you have absolutely nothing. So to totally give up our will for God's will, that's a learning process. And so we're going to see Hannah get to that, and it's kind of an amazing journey that she goes on. But she learned to be poor in spirit when she decided, again, it's a decision of will, to give up her will for God's will. And we're going to look at 3 areas in her life where she had to let go and say, "Not my will, but God's will." I'm going to go ahead and read 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, because that's where all the names are. Now there was a certain man from Ramathaim Zophim, from the hill country of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Okay, so now that the tongue twisting is all over, If you go really fast, it's almost easier and you can kind of fool people that you know what you're doing.
Just glad we don't have to say.
But so we have our cast of characters here. We have Elkanah, we have Hannah, and we have Peninnah. So let's go ahead and read 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 3 to 6, please.
This man went up from the city yearly to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Also the two sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And whenever the time came for Elkanah to make an offering, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable, if the Lord had closed her womb.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to see here that first, to be able to say, not my will, but God's will, Hannah had to let go of depending on her circumstances. Hannah was unhappy. She had been deeply unhappy for years. We would call it depressed for years. More than anything, she wanted a baby. If you've ever struggled with infertility or known anyone who struggles with infertility, that can just really consume you and just be such a big focus. That was the will for her life. I have to have a baby. It's probably safe to say that she thought if she could get pregnant, then everything would be okay. Peninnah would leave her alone. Elkanah would be proud of her. Everything would be great. Go ahead.
Well, I think she knew how much he loved her. It was his other wife that was making her life more miserable.
But we'll see how, he struggled with that too some, and we'll see that in a little bit. But again, you can understand how she could think, if I could just change my circumstances, everything will be fine. It's kind of like it'll just be great. But Hannah changing her circumstances, that's the answer to all my problems. Generally, when people, and I've seen this so many times, when people move, they take their problems with them. They totally change their circumstances and they still have the same problems. How did that happen? Because you take it with you. But Hannah continued to be terribly unhappy year after year. We don't know how many years this was, but Peninnah had multiple sons and daughters. So that takes some time. And she's unhappy year after year. She's depending on her circumstances. And this, if only this one thing changed. And I've heard people say, and I've heard this, when people say that when their circumstances change, their commitment to God will change. Now, they're not going to say it like that, but, and they probably don't see it like that, but we've probably all heard people say something like, when I have more money, then I'll give some back to God. Or when my kids are grown, then I'll be at worship whenever the doors are open. Then I can be on time. Oops, I don't want to step on any toes that way.
God, if you will, I will.
Yes, yeah. And it's kind of like, wait a minute. Yeah, right.
Bargaining.
Uh-huh. And we've all heard these circumstance-based excuses for not putting God first. I need this. If God just does this, why hasn't God done this? I can't, how can I trust God who isn't doing this for me, forgetting all the things God has done for us? But okay. But to be honest, now this may just be me, but I'm guessing here that we've probably all gone through hard times when it was at least tempting to think that just this one thing was different. If my health was better, if my loved one's health was better, or if I just had this one thing that I really need. For example, maybe if I just had a bit more money and I would feel more secure, and then I could be happy. And these aren't bad things. They're really not, unless we feel that if we can't have them, we can't really trust God. So which is coming first is the question there. If we have to have them, or we think that God isn't in control, this horrible thing has happened. How can I believe God is in control? I don't know about y'all, but there are times that kind of strikes me, especially when you look out into the world and the world is so horrible. Where's God in this? But again, what are we putting first? Are we still trusting? And you see David question all the time in the Psalms. I love reading the Psalms because David will say, why God? Because it's okay to ask why. Why is this happening? Why aren't you here? Where are you? But he always, always ends with, I know that my Redeemer lives. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, at least I'm speaking for myself, focus on the negative or the hard things we're going through in life instead of focusing on the blessings. And you focus on the blessings. And I get a daily scripture from a very, very special lady. And one of them, that was yesterday. My prayer is that your anxiety be diminished as you pray with gratitude to the Lord and his peace that exceeds understanding. And that's what we should focus on.
But it's hard. Oh, it's hard.
Preached on anxiety on Sunday.
Yep. Because one of the lies of the devil is that when we're in the valley will last forever. I mean, that is, I mean, and our lives are, peaks and valleys over and over. Our faith is peaks and valleys too, but hopefully continuing to improve. But that is a lie of the devil. If you're down and if you're hurting like Hannah was hurting, you're always going to be hurting. And then again, if my circumstances aren't what I want, then I at least want to understand why. I'm a why kind of person. I want to know why. Why are things happening the way they are? There's not always an answer. But if we want to be poor in spirit, if we want to say, not my will, but God's will, we have to let go of depending on our circumstances. We have to, there's an acceptance there that's really hard sometimes because we have to let go of trying to control our circumstances. Go ahead.
One of the questions I've started asking, certainly later in my life, is God, what do you want me to learn from this?
Right.
Please teach it to me.
And a little quicker so I don't have to keep going through this. Yeah. Help me get it. Now I believe that God is in control, but sometimes it's hard not to spend a huge amount of time and effort struggling to change something in my life that I have no control over, especially when it comes to my kids. That's really hard. Yeah, especially when you're having grown kids, they can come to you, it's wonderful when they come to you for advice, but they're grown. They're making their own decisions and I can't control that anyway. Yes.
I've seen, when you're going through something, it's like, why is this happening to you? Now I don't understand. Later on, it's like, now that made more sense after the fact. But you have to
Sometimes, yeah. And a lot of times we can look back on our lives, and that's one thing, and I don't do this, but a prayer journal is a good idea because you can look back and see where God has answered prayer. And I know people who do that, and it's a blessing in their lives.
It just,
But
not just an answer to prayer per se, but it's like, when you look back at why you went through something, you weren't praying to go through this, it's just something you were going through at the time, but there was a reason for it.
Yeah. And sometimes you can see that. Sometimes we will live our entire lives and never understand why we had to go through something or someone we loved had to go through something.
Sometimes it's just.
Yeah. And we can't control it any more than Hannah could control whether or not she got pregnant. I want to read 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 16 and 18, which reads, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything, not in some things, not when things go my way, but in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. And then Philippians 4:13, Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Where was Paul when he wrote that?
Person.
Okay.
In person.
He was not in the comfort of his own home. He was not in an air-conditioned building. He was in prison, and he wrote, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, because he had given his will over to God. So that's why he could write, whether I have a lot, whether I have a little, whether I'm in prison, whether, it doesn't matter my circumstances. He can be content because God is in control, and he had given control of his life over to God. And we have to let go of depending on our circumstances or trying to control our circumstances, because that's what I try to do. If we want to be able to say, not my will, but God's will. Any other thoughts before we go on to the second? Okay. Let's read 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 7 to 9, and then 12 to 14 and 17.
It happened year after year, as often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she would provoke her. So she wept and would not eat. Then Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep, and why do you not eat, and why is your heart sad? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? Then Hannah rose after eating, drinking, in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the temple of the Lord.
Now it came about, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli was watching her mouth. As for Hannah, she was speaking in her heart. Only her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Then Eli said to her, "How long will you make yourself drunk? Put away your wine from you." Then Eli answered and said, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant your petition that you have asked of him."
All right, so the second area where Hannah had to learn to be able to say not my will but God's will was that she had to let go of relying on others before she could be poor in spirit. Now, I'm not saying we don't get support from people, and that is a blessing from God that we get the support of people in our church family, in our families. But even the best person will let us down from time to time. It just happens.
Can you imagine how she must have felt when the priest came to her?
I
and
know.
said,
Yeah, I'm getting to, I've
Great
never been
girl.
impressed with Eli, but I'm getting to that. But so we cannot rely on others to keep us faithful to God. We cannot rely on others to help us put God. I mean, they can help us, but we can't rely on that. We can't be relying on others. They can encourage us, but they can't make it so that we replace our will with God's will. Elkanah loved Hannah very much, and he did his best to show her his love for her and comfort her. But it seems like he just couldn't quite get it. It's kind of like, she's hurting, and he's kind of like, I'm right here. There was something, maybe he couldn't get it. Maybe she couldn't let go of the hurt enough to accept help from him, but something wasn't connecting there. Something wasn't working. And no matter how much he showed her that he loved her, she was still deeply unhappy.
The difference between a man and a woman, even, I mean.
Yeah, it's
Well,
Yeah.
and his other wife, like I said previously, she just,
right. And then that's my next point, is that Peninnah just worked at making Hannah miserable, possibly out of jealousy. I don't want to excuse her bad behavior, but Elkanah did love Hannah, and Peninnah was kind of there for
And he may not
babies.
have been aware of all the torment.
Might not have, because my assumption is that when they went to Shiloh to worship on a yearly basis, then they were having to share closer quarters because that wasn't their home. But at home, they would have had separate quarters. Hannah and Peninnah probably could have gone weeks without seeing each other and probably didn't care to see each other. But again, so when they're going to worship, I mean, this is the hard part here. When they're going to worship, Peninnah is tormenting Hannah, and just to the point where she's crying.
she also thought that he loved him.
Yes.
Because he gave her double portion.
Right.
And everything.
And that's possibly why Peninnah acted out of jealousy, but go ahead.
So we've got 2 wives.
Mhm. There's never a happy,
That's not a good thing.
the Bible never shows a happy polygamous relationship.
The Lord is allowing this and
Yep.
stuff, so I mean, this is always odd to me.
He's allowing it, there's always consequences.
Yep.
And it's not a happy thing. So, and then there was Eli the priest, who should have been a source of godly comfort. And in my opinion, y'all can disagree with me, he just wasn't.
No.
Godly worship at that time was incredibly difficult. God even sent a prophet to Eli to rebuke him and his sons, because in chapter 2, verse 29, they had contempt for God's sacrifice. Imagine taking your sacrifice and just the way they treated it, and where God calls them out for having contempt for the sacrifice. And eventually it got so bad that God removed Eli and his sons and the entire family from serving as priests. It's kind of like you're just making it too hard on Israel as a whole. Worship had gotten to the point under Eli's leadership, he's the priest, that he saw someone praying and assumed she was drunk. I mean, that's how bad worship had gotten, how difficult proper worship had gotten. And in my opinion, in verse 17, where he's kind of, they're there, in my opinion, y'all can disagree with me, but Eli's kind of embarrassed. He knew what was going on. She was drunk, and she said, "No, I'm not drunk. I haven't had anything. I'm praying. I'm hurting." And so I see kind of an embarrassed response of, they're there, be warmed and filled, see you later. He wasn't really any help. Now, you may think I'm unfair to Eli, but I've read several chapters of Eli, and this, my opinion fit with his character, whether or not I'm right, but,
His
But it-
human characteristics came to
Yeah.
light.
yeah, he just was not a source of godly comfort to any worshiper who came. Go
I
ahead.
think it's a lesson to us today too, how we approach people,
Mhm.
the assumptions we make. And
Oh, yeah,
so we, instead of being loving and understanding and truly trying to find out what the problem is, we just jump to conclusions. And
sure.
then we can really do some damage,
Oh, yeah.
big time.
So it seems for Hannah, the good person in her life who loved her, Elkanah, didn't make any difference to her. The bad person, Penina, made things 10 times worse. And isn't that typical? We have good things in our life, but we have that one bad thing, and that just takes over everything else. Or we have wonderful friends and all this kind of stuff, and we have one person that we could just give them a little twist. It's just, and that's the person that we focus on. That's the person that just consumes all our thoughts. It's crazy, but that's the way it goes. So Hannah had to let go of depending on other people to make her happy, to make her holy, to make her whatever, to bring her closer to God before she could be poor in spirit. She had to let go of that particular dependence, because we have to decide for ourselves. We have to make that decision ourselves. And just like with circumstances, people in our lives can get between us and God. And I'm going to give you 3 examples here where I've actually watched that happen. I'm sure everyone has their own examples. But one young man's grandmother suffered dementia for years before dying, and he blamed God, and he lost his faith. He turned away from God because of that. That person who was important in his life, and it was good. She was wonderful in his life. But that person came between him and God. I saw the temptation to get along with the in-laws pull an entire family away from God. Well, we just want to get along with them. You know, we just need to all get along. And then you just don't see them anymore eventually. And I was told by one individual that what they wanted to do and the person they wanted to do it with was more important than God. And you hear those things. I'm sure we all have stories like that of someone saying this person, just like with this circumstance, is more important than God. They may not come right out and say it like this one person did, just came right out and said it. And I'm kind of like, what can you do with that? There's just not a whole lot you can do with that. They're doing that. And we all have people who are important to us. But if we feel we must have this person in our life, no matter what, it can be tempting to let them come between us and God. And that's what we see. I've seen it, and we've probably all seen it. Eli the priest loved his sons as any father should, but he let that love make them more important to him than God. In 1 Samuel 2:9, God sent a prophet to Eli to ask him, why are you honoring your sons above me? He put his sons before God, literally, and God called him out on it. In Matthew 10:37, Jesus says, not the one who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. The one who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And I've got to admit, that verse is a personal struggle because I love my family. We waited for a while for Sarah, and I love Sarah so much. But again, we have to let go of that self-will when it comes to people who are important to us. God must be first. God is not our co-pilot. He is not going to take second place in our lives. He must come first. His will must replace our self-will in relationships. And actually that will bless relationships. For Sam and I, if you ask either of us, what's the most important thing in your life, we'll say God. And we did from the beginning. And doing that, let us put each other in a place where we probably wouldn't have otherwise. And honor each other more because God is first. So it helps our relationships, but it's hard to see that when someone is saying, no, I don't believe in God anymore, and I don't want to hear it from you. And you're kind of like, but you're so important to me. And it's hard. What do you do with that? And we have a decision to make if that happens. Any comments on that? Okay. Let's go ahead and read 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 3, and then verses 10 to 11.
This man went up from his city yearly to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Also the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head.
Thank you. All right, so Hannah's family worshiped the way they were supposed to. They didn't let all of the hypocrisy, all the people were doing worship the bad way. Even the priest, when it mentions Hophni and Phinehas, they were horrible. I mean, they were just horrible people. And they were part of the worship. You had to deal with them to be able to go up and worship at Shiloh. So they worshiped. Hannah and her family. Elkanah led his family in proper worship. They went when they were supposed to Shiloh. They did the things they were supposed to. They were not discouraged. Elkanah led his family, and they were not discouraged from proper worship because of all the hypocrisy around them. Hannah prayed desperately year after year after. You can imagine her doing this over and over each year when they go up to make the sacrifice, praying desperately to God about all the pain in her heart, trying to do all the right things, trying to have the right attitudes, trying to worship the right way, but that doesn't automatically get us to poor in spirit. Because if we're still hanging on to something, and it's just so easy to say, if I'm just a good enough person, God will bless me. Or if I just, if I'm doing this right, then why isn't this? Why aren't I being blessed? Why am I going through this hard thing? We still have people today, and this has been going on practically from the beginning of time. If something bad happens, then what did they do wrong? And that's not the case, generally speaking. But again, there have been so many times when I've gone to God praying, God, I'm doing everything I know, and I just don't understand. I'm trying to live a godly life, and all these bad things are happening. Not right now, but when I mean, we've all been through those bad things when we're kind of like, God, what's going on? I'm doing everything. But again, is it about us doing the right thing? It never is. Bad things happen. The devil will come after us as long as we have breath and we're on, according to him, the wrong side. He will continue to come after us. And so we can be doing the right thing and still struggle with bad things.
So I'm Chronicle, about reading and happened to be in Job.
Yes.
Talking Job did nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And all those things.
Yeah. And he would say that. He's kind of like, and he wasn't claiming to be a perfect person, but he says, I am, as far as God has commanded, I'm righteous. I'm doing the right things.
Well, God
I don't get it.
Job
Yes, he did.
to prove to Satan that he would be.
Yeah. But Job, we don't know. We have no indication that Job ever knew why things were happening. We just have, God just said, I'm God. That needs to be enough.
The same way with us today.
It is.
Bad things happen.
It is. And again, but if we're doing all the right things, just like Job, we wonder why. Why is this happening? I don't want to be just like Job because that's just too much. But again, but still, even when the bad things happen, it's hard to wonder, we're doing the right things. I'm doing the right things. My family's doing the right things. What's going on here? Why isn't the right things enough to have an easy life? Well, it's not. If you think about it that way, then you realize, oh, that's just dumb to begin with. That doesn't, but again, it's easy to fall into that, I'm praying right. I'm doing these things right. Why isn't the right, result happening? Did you have a?
Well, I was thinking of something it's a sermon I've listened to, and he said, when bad things happen, we tend to think, okay, what have I done wrong? Am I being punished? And sometimes God does.
And we do need to
Yes,
self-examine.
Yes. Or we think, or we really can see that these trials are strengthening in us. But he brought up something I never thought of. He said sometimes the trials and the problems we have aren't to benefit us, but to benefit others who are watching us.
Mhm.
And that's kind of hard. But
That is, especially if it's not you can't see it immediately.
Yep.
If it's something that it's like, oh, now I'm able to help this person decades later because I went through this other thing.
Or they see through your example
Yeah.
how you handled that
Mhm.
situation, and then
Yeah.
to bring them back or to strengthen them. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, some
That's a
people-
hard one.
Some non-Christians are just waiting for you to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
slip up.
Mhm.
yeah.
Done.
We're not
Oh,
Sometimes, well, not typically, but it's like I would be like, oh, everything is going good, life is great. And then something happens, I'm like, why did I even get comfortable thinking life is going great? Because then something bad happens, that kind of thing.
but then again, that's depending on ourselves.
Yeah.
If we're depending on God, then that attitude doesn't change. Bad things happen. Yeah, bad things happen. God is still in control. Good things happen. Great. Good things are happening. God is still in control. Go ahead.
Many times we just wonder, why? Why is this going on?
Yeah.
Where are you, God? But now think about Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me? We know why, because of us.
Yeah.
But it's okay to ask why.
It is. And that's what I was saying earlier, that David actually wrote that line that first that you're talking about. And he asked why so many times, but his conclusion was always the same. God is my redeemer. God is right there. I know he is right there. I don't understand any of this other stuff. Why that, he would say that, the jackals have surrounded me, the dogs have surrounded me, all this kind of stuff. Everyone's out to get me. Things are bad. He's running for his life from his own son. I mean, all these things. And he still came to the conclusion, the Lord is my redeemer. And that attitude of God's will, not my will, I believe is why God called him a man after his own heart. Yes.
When we focus on the bad that's happening in our life at that
Mhm.
time, our eyes often are closed to God's blessings that we receive even during that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Or we forget the blessings that we've had for so long. Suddenly we're having some health struggles. And we forget, I've had 60 years of healthy, and so I'm having a cup, it's kind of like, do I forget that all of a sudden how much God has blessed when there is a struggle?
But Sky, as you get older, you get frustrated because I used to be able to do this. I can't lift this. I can't do this.
Right.
I can't get off the floor without a plan, But you gotta think, but I did do it once.
Yeah.
I was capable.
Yeah.
I did have a time. My age is preventing me now, but I did enjoy that and have all that at one time.
Mhm.
And we need to thank the Lord that I did have it.
Yeah.
We can think back.
Yeah. And now I can hire someone to do it. I don't want to do yard work right now, so I have my yard guy do it.
You're just scared of snakes.
I'm terrified of snakes.
Oh, I've seen it. I killed a few.
Yeah, I killed a copperhead the other day, but anyway, go ahead.
Living with an unbeliever as Brett for years and years, I've tried wanting to help him be different.
Absolutely.
But if I focused on that all the time, then I could not, it would hinder my
Very.
Mhm.
So you can't focus, you do the best you can because I have no control. And the older you get, that's what you learn.
Yeah.
The less control you have.
And that's what we've seen in Hannah's life, because for years and years, I mean, this has been going on for years. Her praying, her struggling, her depression has been going on for multiple years. But we're going to see how she's kind of grown through this.
Side source causing her pain.
Penina.
Well, I know, but I mean, her problem was because she hadn't had a child.
Yeah.
And that's
But again,
what
her
she focused on.
circumstances, her circumstances, the people in her life were either not helping or hindering, because Eli wasn't any help either. And then we see that, her prayer here, it's kind of like, she's not praying for forgiveness. She knows that she has led the life that she's supposed to. She's not saying, oh, I know I'm being punished or anything like that.
She's something that is
But it hasn't happened.
But it's all
It's,
her.
yeah.
It's
It
all
is.
her. I mean, it's
And
not-
again, that self-will that she wants, that's what she is focused on. If I just have this one thing, if my will in this one thing, for her, it was a baby. For us, it might be health. It might be our kids. It might be whatever it
But
is.
you can't focus
that
just on
self-will.
that one thing. Hannah needed to
Yeah.
change.
She keeps
Realized
repeating.
she wasn't going to have a baby, even though, okay, pray for it, yes. But that's all she focused on.
But how hard is that for us? If there's
Well,
that
that's what I
one
was
thing,
saying.
if there's
can't
that
do
one thing that we don't understand why, say, this is a good thing I'm praying for. Why?
But I don't always get it.
But
Yeah,
I think because.
But it's
of-
hard not to just totally focus on it like
but I
Hannah
think
did.
because Penina kept ripping into her, I have kids, you
Yeah.
don't.
But we always have somebody that's going, the
Yeah.
devil's always gonna come at you.
But it is,
But you have to live with what you
Yeah.
got.
but it's hard. And that's a growth. I think I think you grow into that and grow to the point where you can let go more and more, let go of our own will.
That is my true prayer for Keely, because,
No, it's way too much.
but it's all about what she doesn't have, what she can't do.
Right.
What, she just,
Instead of focusing on what she can do.
Yep.
but she's immature.
As she
Yes,
matures.
Yeah.
I pray with all my,
There's too much, class.
But again, we can't depend on our circumstances or on people or being good enough. We have to let go of our will and accept God's will and trust that He will care for us no matter what happens. Proverbs 3 verse 5 reads, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And 1 Peter 5:7 reads, give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you. When you read through the Old Testament, when you read God telling Israel, my right arm is with you. I mean, my strength, that's another way of saying that God's strength is with us. That's amazing. And when we read that God cares for us individually, knows what we need, cares for us, that is amazing. Any other thoughts about?
If I had been born blind, then I prayed every day for the Lord to give me sight. I need to realize I'm not going to get sight. It's a physical problem. And just live with it and continue on with God's will.
Yeah.
Count what
But
I
it's
can
hard.
do.
It is hard.
I mean, if I was born without a leg, I mean,
Blaming God.
I mean, nothing's going to be easy that we have
Right.
something wrong happen. But you can't dwell on that only.
True. But plenty of people do, and plenty of people even blame God. But that's the struggle. But we see Hannah go through that struggle. She doesn't blame God, but she just goes through my circumstance. I need this.
She's so depressed.
Yes, she is. Well, let's go ahead and read verses 15 to 19, please.
And I answered and said, no, my Lord, I'm a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. Then Eli answered and said, go in peace, and the Lord God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked of him. And she said, let your maidservant find favor in your sight. So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad.
Okay, and verse 19, please.
And what?
Verse 19.
I thought, oh. Then they rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord and returned and came to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her.
Okay. All right, so let's see what got Hannah too poor in spirit, because I'm convinced that she got there. After years of praying, years of heartache, years of torment, something clicked. Something finally made sense to her. In verse 15, Hannah says that she had poured out her spirit to God, poured out all of that hurt, all of that self-will, all of that self, poured it out to God. Verse 18 says that she was no longer sad. She was no longer hurting as she had been. She felt like eating, where she hadn't for years. Now this cycle of going to worship, being tormented by Penina, getting so upset she couldn't eat, crying her heart out to God in prayer, this had been going on for years. And at this point, something has changed. Now, her circumstances hadn't changed. She's still not pregnant at this point in verse 15, where she pours out her heart. And then in verse 18, where she's no longer sad, where she feels like eating. Something has changed, not her circumstances. She's still not pregnant. Penina is still mean. But something in her attitude toward God had changed. She let go. And the key is found in verse 15, which says she poured out her spirit to God. And I'm convinced that when she did that, she poured out that self-will and figured out, I can't, Elkanah can't, Eli can't, my circumstances can't, all these things can't. I'm going to pour it out to God, and I'm going to just leave it with God.
I think it started in verse 11 with her vow.
Yes. That she's kind of, you know what, here I am. Here's what I want to do for God. Here's how I want to have God working in my life. I think you're absolutely right. Started in verse 11.
It got her out of the
It
depression
did.
to turn to God.
It did. And I'm convinced that she figured out how to let go of self-will, self in control, and self-focus, and focused on God and his will, whatever his will was for her life. Like I said, she still wasn't pregnant. Penina was still being a jerk. But that brought her peace, even though her circumstances had not changed. Because she's kind of like, okay, God, I'm going to let it go. If this is what you want, because this is what I will do. If this is what you want, then I'm right here. Otherwise, I'm gonna. She let it go. It seemed right there, because when she poured out her spirit. Go ahead.
I wonder if she was physically beyond childbearing years.
Don't know. It does not say. Any other thoughts?
Oh, I thought about, she had more children after that.
Yes, she
I
did.
understand she had 8 more children after
She
this
had
one
quite a.
was born, and I wonder, in the throes of childbirth, she was thinking, oh, Lord.
Be careful what you pray for.
Anyway, any other thoughts before we finish up here? Yeah. Careful what you pray for, huh? But yeah, I don't remember how many sons she had, but she did have quite a few. She did have other sons, and God did bless her.
Yep.
But again, she was already blessed because she was no longer sad. She was no longer so twisted up inside that she couldn't eat. She had let that go and accepted, whatever God's will in my life is. All right. Any other thoughts? Okay. I want to finish up with just a couple of thoughts. God has given us all free will. We have a choice who is in control of our lives. God calls for us to submit to his will, not just a little bit, but all of it. And that's the thing. I don't know what number 5 means.
How did God bless her?
Oh, she had a child.
Define that.
That's the blessing. And then she had other children. That's the blessing. All right. So James 4 verse 7 reads, therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And verse 10 says, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. Being poor in spirit is letting God have what is his. That is us, all of us, all control, all obedience, all faith, and blessings will follow. I mean, the peace and the joy that we have when we're not trying to fight things so hard. I want to finish with Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, which reads, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Thank you so much for your time and for your comments.